Why are we attracted by places we shouldn't go to? One of the most compelling aspects of video games is the opportunity we have to go explore areas filled with hidden secrets or terrifying discoveries. No matter the danger, we cannot resist the appeal of a forbidden space because we need to know why that location is off limits and what's in there that no one should ever see. Take the horror game Stay Out of the House, for example, which begins with us searching for our missing partner in an abandoned rural area where we come across a wheat field at the end of which is a house. A big farmhouse, whose appearance makes us shiver. Bright red lights are being cast from the windows, and the garden is cluttered with junk and flamingo statues. Something's wrong here. We should stay out of the house. Yet we press on and get closer to the entrance when suddenly a dog appears and barks toward the open door before rushing inside, vanishing into the darkness. Then comes a silence. Then a clang. The dog's bark turns into a deep, long whine. We look around in distress because we know this isn't a safe place, and we know we should most definitely stay out of the house. So what do? We go into the house. Games excel at daring us to enter forbidden, secluded locations like this one, and the more dangerous the place seems to be, the more curious we are about it. Before we explore what's inside the house, consider this. What do you think it contains? And if you imagine terrible things, why are you still curious about it? Because yes, once we step inside, the entryway reveals to be as horrific as we imagine it to be from the outside. The walls are torn and covered in blood, there's junk all over the floor, and the furniture looks filthy. This is clearly not a normal farmhouse. This is a sinister space no one should ever set foot in, for reasons I'll explain later. But more importantly now, why did we enter, despite knowing it would be dangerous? This video will answer this question by showcasing some of the most intriguing forbidden locations in gaming, and by explaining how these locations toy with the player's mind. Resident Evil 7 offers great insight into the allure of forbidden places, as it opens on a well-known horror cliché. Your wife Mia has been missing for 3 years when, out of nowhere, you get a message from her telling you to go join her in Dolby, Louisiana. What the protagonist doesn't see, but we, the player, do, is a video of Mia in which she looks terrified and asks Ethan to stay away at all costs. Needless to say, the game begins the moment we arrive at the very place we should stay away from. Interestingly, while we may understand Ethan's motivations, we, on the other hand, know about the dangers of the house and decide to go there anyway. The difference between Ethan and the player's viewpoint highlights something important. Resident Evil 7 plays with our morbid curiosity, which, contrary to the noble intentions of Ethan, is everything but noble. Our desire to visit and explore the house, in spite of Mia's warning, comes from the simple fact that we shouldn't. Nothing can pique our interest more than a place that promises to hide things too dangerous and horrifying for us to face. And Mia's advice proves to be adequate. The house in Resident Evil 7 is abject, owned by the deranged, infested Baker family, and filled with abominable creatures who seem to come from another world. We arrive here at the core of horror as an art form, whose objective is to display places and creatures outside of the natural world, outside of the reality we know. The house of the Baker family is forbidden because it's a place like no other, in which reside things whose appearance and behavior defy anything we've ever seen or could conceive of. In a way, forbidden places function as a separate reality that ignores the conventional rules of space and logic. In Dredge, the deepest parts of the ocean become, at night, a dangerous space where strange phenomena are taking place, while horrific sea creatures lurk around the corner of every wave. The shift from a calm, cozy game to a horror experience is triggered by the presence of a place no one should dare to sail. Learning about the existence of such a space compels us to explore it, because it's a chance to encounter unknown and formidable creatures. To put it differently, forbidden places offer something so enticing that we are willing to brave unfathomable dangers to see it. What these places offer is another world, so to speak, in which what we thought we knew about reality crumbles at the sight of a spectacle like no other. This is even more apparent in Darkest Dungeon, where we control a band of mercenaries going into bleak dungeons filled with despair. There, in one of these bleak dungeons, we can stumble upon an otherworldly type of altar, on which we can read, "The sacrifice of fire is a gate to ruin. Place a torch if you crave the void." A warning sign, perhaps, or maybe a challenge directed at the player, who can either heed the call or walk away. But the moment a game dares us to enter a dangerous area, we often take the bait, which in this case translates into putting a torch into the altar and get immediately transported to another realm, a secluded, eldritch place among the stars where the Shambler awaits us. The creature seems to come from the darkest abyss. Its shape and demeanor recalls the most terrifying creatures from Lovecraft's tales. And yet, we cannot help but find that realm and that creature mesmerizing just as much as they are horrifying. The forbidden space we find ourselves in is an ancient, monstrous realm we look at in awe. The reason we're in awe when facing otherworldly places has to do with the fact that they promise to show us a new kind of terror, a new dimension we've never seen before. Newness resides at the bottom of forbidden areas. The concept of newness or of the new is intertwined with the unknown and to a certain extent with horror. Let me explain. The etymology of the word new is tied to something made or established for the first time, something unheard of, untried, inexperienced, unfamiliar. Whenever we confront something we're not familiar with, we cannot help but being traversed by a shiver at the sight of the unknown and of the danger it may unleash. In many Lovecraft stories, the protagonist begins their tale by explaining that they encountered a sinister place, like in the short story The Nameless City. "I was traveling in a parched and terrible valley under the moon, and a viewless aura repelled me and bade me retreat from antique and sinister secrets that no man should see, and no man else had ever dared to see." But just as much as we are afraid of these places, we are also curious, inquisitive about something we don't understand. The sight of an entirely new realm, however frightening it may be, retains an enduring beauty because the moment we see something new is the moment our comprehension of the world and what the world is capable of producing and hiding is shattered. The world we thought we knew is no longer, as we understand that there are things out there that our mind cannot even fathom. Forbidden locations open our eyes to the unseen, and they are forbidden for the reason that once we face the unseen, we cannot go back and unsee it. This is why entering these condemned places comes at a price. Most of Lovecraft's protagonists end up losing their mind and sanity after experiencing untold terrors, like in The Call of Cthulhu, in which the narrator ends his tale by stating that, "I have looked upon all that the universe had hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long." Of course, these descents into madness are purely fictional and a narrative hook to keep readers glued to the page, but they are useful in thinking about the compelling natures of the forbidden and the monstrous, given how they both lift up a veil from reality, or more precisely, from the reality we are familiar with. PT is a psychological horror game in which we navigate the same nightmarish hallway repeatedly, with each traversal becoming increasingly horrific. The hallway is a case example of forbidden places. It's haunted by a ghost and other intelligible terrors. It's a place we cannot escape from, and more important than all that, the game opens on a text telling us to watch out. There are already countless theories and analyses about the game's meaning, but in the context of this video, I wish to analyze the nature of this specific forbidden space, because PT's identity is tied to its hallway. The latter is inherently paradoxical. It represents a transition from one room to another. But in the case of PT, the hallway is the one and only space we traverse, which means that there is no end to the transitory and liminal status of the hallway. The corridor is no longer a passage connecting two things together. Its transitory nature became permanent, hence why we interact with a ghost in a game. the woman who died at the hand of her husband is neither alive nor dead, but a bit of both. Ghosts often symbolize dead people who cannot leave our tangible plane of existence, causing their identity to be split between two different aspects, much like the hallway and the game itself. We have to remember that PT stands for playable tests, and that the status of the game is ambivalent, in that it's a game that's not really one, or to put it differently, it's a transitory object teasing a future game which never came to be. As such, PT reflects the status and intent of the forbidden space it contains. Additionally, while the watchout clearly wants us not to go into that place, it is followed by an enigmatic sentence. The gap in a door, it's a separate reality. Here, the nature of the restricted area is explicitly shared with the player. The place is another reality. Notice the choice of words here. It's not a different reality, or even a surreal space. We're dealing with a separate reality, one that exists on equal footing with the one we know. PT's hallway is forbidden because it embodies a space in which the rules of our reality do not apply. These unknown rules of the hallway present another and terrifying version of the world we used to know and live in. We are facing here an example of weird reality, which the scholar Brad Tabas defines as a reality radically independent of our will and designs. In brief, the hallway represents a space whose reality we have no control over and whose rules cannot be understood by our human mind. This is very reminiscent of Silent Hill's Otherworld, which presents the player with another plane of existence that is just as real as our own, but features entirely different logic and appearance, veering into the macabre. The books Annihilation and Roadside Picnic, the latter being a major inspiration for the game Stalker, present something similar when they describe quarantined zones in which anomalies took over after aliens stayed there. These types of spaces behave very differently from the reality we are used to, and are the reason why indescribable atrocities can and do happen there. Again, forbidden spaces are locations in which the human veil we put on reality is lifted, and thus they are locations too alien and terrifying for our mind. Finally, and to go back to PT, we are drawn to the hallway despite its danger because we accepted and made a pact with the game. The warning message at the beginning is not here just to let us know about what's ahead of us. It also acts as a pact between us and the game. A pact we sign when we learn about the dangers ahead but still proceed to go forward. The moment we open the door for the first time and walk through it, we accept that we are about to experience a separate reality that has been forbidden to us. In a way, and because we accepted this alternate reality, we are even looking forward to it. Any game that contains a forbidden area must make sure to fill it with unnameable horrors, or the player may feel disappointed by it. Once the game explicitly states that the space ahead is forbidden, it better be a horrific space since the player's expectations are high after reading the warning sign. It's not enough for the forbidden to be, pardon the pun, foreboding. The forbidden must also match the intensity of its cautionary tale. A famous trope in games is to contain terrifying basements because they are perceived as restricted, hidden places where terrifying things are concealed. By being located underneath and being hidden from natural light, they embody a space we cannot help but fear. In the indie horror game The Door in the Basement, we play a character who, as a kid, found a door which would only appear to them and no one else. The door would sometimes disappear only to appear again. The premise of the game is built on one simple idea: to enter a forbidden place in the basement. And as we can guess, what that place contains is not to be seen because of how unsettling it is. But there are more examples of basements in games. In Fallout 3, there's a famous house in which lives the Smith family. When talking to them, something feels off, and rightly so. They're a bunch of cannibals hiding corpses in their basement. Slay the Prince's whole plot revolves around having to kill a princess, otherwise the world will end. And the princess is of course located in the basement of an isolated cabin. In Resident Evil 7, the basement is covered in disgusting black goo and inhabited by creatures whose bodies appear to be made of the most repulsive mud imaginable, and whose physical abilities exceed our wildest expectations. Finally, in the case of Stay Out of the House, players' expectations are subverted when, once we are inside the house and we discover the basement, we are surprisingly safe down there. Instead of being immediately killed, we find the whining dog and free him from a bear trap. However, danger still looms as we return upstairs and are being chased by a hooded figure who catches us. Symbolically, basements may represent the subconscious, that is, the part of the mind that we are not fully aware of but which can guide our actions and feelings. The subconscious may repress emotions and memories. It's a forbidden part of our mind that, once we enter a basement, we are confronting. No matter how repressed some of our thoughts are, a basement can be a way to manifest them, forcing us to face what lies in the deepest corners of our mind. And the fact that basements usually have no exit implies that they force us to confront our darkest desires or fears, with no way of getting out. Something similar happens in what I consider to be the most terrifying area in Dark Souls, a place from which we cannot exit, the Abyss. Specifically, the Abyss at the far end of the New Londo ruins. First, this area is only accessible after lowering the floodgates, defeating the famous boss Sif, and wearing the ring he leaves behind. Once these conditions are met, we must descend a spiral staircase that ends abruptly, forcing us to jump into the void to see what lies below. This jump is terrifying, as it requires us to let go of everything and surrender ourselves to the abyss. Entering this forbidden area means accepting that there is no way back, no exit to be found. The descent is long and chilling, and upon finally reaching the ground, we are enveloped in darkness, making navigation nearly impossible. When the boss of the area appears and we realize we must fight and defeat the 4 kings, we understand that we have entered an ancient and dreadful realm from which we desperately wish to escape. Thus far, we've talked about forbidden places we shouldn't enter, but once we inevitably do, these forbidden areas are also spaces from which we must escape. This is a case of Pacific Drive, which begins with us on our way to deliver a package. But things take a turn for the worse when a bright rift materializes out of thin air and sucks us in. The rift is, in fact, an anomaly that transports us to the Olympic Exclusion Zone, a region in Washington state whose access has been completely prohibited due to anomalies and dangerous events appearing after scientists experimented with a new technology. Just like in Stalker, this region is filled with anomalies, abnormal topographies, radioactive objects, and so on. Even more puzzling is the fact that everything within the zone behaves very differently from the normal world. The weather is extremely dangerous and toxic, objects can appear at any moment, and the area is capable of twisting and assembling things from our world into hideous new forms. The most fascinating aspect of the game is the absence of creatures or enemies we would find in horror games, for instance. Here, the zone is a dangerous entity in and of itself. It's a forbidden place which is dangerous not because it is the home of otherworldly creatures. Rather, it is dangerous because it's a space which produces hazardous incidents and phenomena which have no equivalent to what we know. Paradoxically, our salvation will come from the zone we're trying to get out of. The game is structured into missions, where we are looking to salvage resources and extract ourselves from the increasing dangers surrounding us once we collect anchors with strange energy in them. So we're dealing with an extraction game here, which consists in getting into forbidden areas to then leave after looting the weird and supernatural materials we find. Extraction games are excellent at providing forbidden playgrounds that we, as players, must explore and then exit. Hunt Showdown is also an extraction shooter, but with a survival horror twist. The game's world is under the influence of the Sculptor, an eldritch extra-dimensional entity that corrupts everything, turning animals into abominations and humans into zombies. Players acting as hunters venture into the most dangerous parts of Louisiana, where the Sculptor's influence is strongest. This is reminiscent of the Stalkers, who explore the zone in order to extract valuable Eldritch materials and sell them, or even the Dark Zones of the Division, which are contaminated areas where we seek rarer loot. In all these extraction games, forbidden areas are dangerous and hazardous playgrounds that offer greater rewards. These locations not only feature corrupted entities and unseen anomalies, but also present higher challenges with greater stakes. Every incursion risks losing everything we've gathered, along with our time and effort. These restricted places are appealing because they operate differently. There are no respawns or checkpoints in there. Everything we do has consequences because we explore forbidden environments that are different from the reality we know, but also, and in this case, more importantly, environments which differ from other games' space due to their high-risk, high-reward nature. As a result, horror in extraction games is rooted both in a contaminated land but also in a constant fear of losing our loot and having our hard work go to waste. Returning to Stay Out of the House, the game shifts to a survival-oriented gameplay mode once we are caught by the killer. Our objective now is to escape from the place we shouldn't have entered to begin with. In other words, the forbidden place has become the site we need to leave. To accomplish this, we explore the house searching for tools that might aid our escape while uncovering the hidden history of both the house and the killer. The game thus transitions into a stealth experience where we must avoid being detected by the hooded figure. What begins as a conventional slasher game evolves into a cosmic horror experience as we encounter strange creatures and bizarre, inexplicable events that defy reasonable explanations. As a result, Stay Out of the House's most impressive feature is how it presents the forbidden space. Initially, we perceive the house merely as a residence of the hooded figure, but as we delve deeper, we uncover unfathomable horrors lurking within, revealing that this space is much more than it first appeared. This design leaves the forbidden space shrouded in mystery, retaining its enigmatic nature even after the game concludes. Finally, and to conclude on this fascinating subject, I'd like to analyze Inscryption, which presents a unique case of a forbidden place. The main setting of the game is an eerie, uncanny cabin, where you wake up and are greeted by a shadowy figure who invites you to play a card game. You soon realize that you are imprisoned in this small cabin, and your captor forces you to play and overcome challenges to progress. The cabin is explorable and contains hidden puzzles and secrets, but it remains a menacing place from which you must escape. Initially, the game resembles a roguelike, where you fight through each area before facing a final boss. Upon defeating the last boss, a new area is revealed, which turns out to be a cabin. The wooden statue you control moves toward it, and just before entering, words appear on top of the screen, stating that your eyes are fixed on the cabin's warm light, which acts as a beacon against the darkness of the night. This is where things become interesting. As the wooden statue enters the cabin, you are immediately teleported outside, as if taking the place of the statue, and are drawn toward the light emanating from the door. This moment underscores why the first act of Inscryption is the best one. Despite the cabin's terrifying nature, where you fight for your life, its light from the outside attracts you like a moth to a flame. Light is inherently attractive because it symbolizes enlightenment and knowledge, drawing us toward it despite the danger. Entering a forbidden realm often means seeking answers to our questions, because once the veil on reality is lifted, as I explained earlier in the case of PT, we then see better. That is, we understand better the world and ourselves. The forbidden place becomes a space where we shine a light on our situation, offering insights and clarity beyond the immediate peril. This is why the first act of Inscryption is the most compelling part of the game. It presents a terrifying place that we wish to enter because the forbidden often holds secrets we couldn't see before. When Inscryption depicts the dreaded cabin bathed in light, it redefines the forbidden as a source of insight. Furthermore, before we re-enter the cabin, the mysterious and menacing tormentor ominously declares that he will put us to death. However, Once we do finally enter, a light turns on and the tormentor reveals himself. Crossing this dangerous threshold can lead to enlightenment and offer a new perspective on a confusing situation. It helps us see the forbidden not merely as a place to avoid at all costs, but as a paradoxical space where we can gain clarity. This reinterpretation of the forbidden is also present in Dredge, though it leads to even more intriguing insights. While sailing the seas, we may encounter a traveling merchant who, at first glance, appears to be just a typical NPC selling and buying goods. However, if we engage in conversation and ask, "Do you ever see strange things out at sea?" the merchant replies, "Strange things? Plenty, but I try not to dwell on them. You could go crazy, you know? Huh." Before adding, "But hey, if you're seeing strange things, maybe you're not seeing them the right way. Maybe they're not so strange after all." This seemingly inconsequential exchange reveals a profound truth. What we perceive as strange or forbidden may simply be a result of our limited perspective. The forbidden is crucial because it opens up a new perspective of the world and of ourselves, that is, of our limited and narrow view of the things we think we know. In effect, the forbidden stands as the opposite of the ordinary, and it detains some truth we could never encounter if it didn't exist. Each time we venture into an off-limits realm, we question the reasoning behind its prohibition. Why did we restrict this area in the first place? And what does it say about us? The unknown will always be a source of fear, but as long as we're heading to a new place we shouldn't, we'll gain a better understanding of the place we just came from. Thank you for accompanying me in the exploration of forbidden spaces. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by subscribing and liking the video. Don't hesitate to also share some of your favorite forbidden spaces. There's a lot of great restricted areas I couldn't mention here. I'll see you in the next video.